It's me, Turble Cellbor, the depressed bisexual who's going to teach you how to use Linux. So this is part 5 of a significant tutorial for a total conversion from Microsoft Windows to a Linux system. My goal here is not merely to teach you how to use Linux, but I want to give you the tools you need to solve your own computer problems in the future. So a couple things you need to know first. Number one, this is a basic tutorial for people who don't have a lot of understanding of computers. I'm not a computer science guy. I'm just a gamer who's been gaming way too long on Linux. In this series, I am going to make the following assumptions when doing this tutorial. So if you don't have any of these things, go back and fix that. So first, I expect that you know how to get onto the internet. I expect that you know how to download a file from your browser. I expect you know how to use your mouse and keyboard. And I expect you know how to install software from your computer using an exe file. And I also am going to assume you watched my other videos. If there's a concept that's going to be used I haven't explained, I'll explain it. So, in part 4, we finally got around to talking about what an operating system actually is. And remember, there's basically 4 parts to an OS that matter. That suite of programs that run the computer, right? So you got a bootloader, you got the file management, you got your shell, and you got your system libraries, right? You're watching this, I'm gonna go as just assume you want to try new OSs, because nobody looks to Linux as a first OS unless you're a freak like me. And the instant a new Linux user, right, you're like, I want to try to use Linux, you're gonna get immediately hit with a shitstorm of choices. Just, oh god, it's ungodly, alright? Oh my god, it's so fucking metal. Look at all this bullshit. Alright, so Linux is a kernel, technically. When people are talking about Linux, they're referring to operating systems that use the Linux kernel. And these operating systems are going to be referred to as distros by people who actually are using Linux all the time, right? Anybody can start a distro. The only thing that every Linux distro absolutely will have in common is a Linux kernel, right? But they may not have anything else in common. So most distros are downstream of much larger upstream projects that are doing the hard work of writing drivers. Think of it like this, okay? So the way the Linux works, right, when there's updates and stuff go through, the Linux Foundation makes and updates the main kernel. Big upstream projects like Red Hat take the kernel, add or remove components to an OS that they make. In Red Hat's case, that would be Red Hat Enterprise Linux. All right, downstream projects, some of which are very large, like Ubuntu, take those kernels and modify them further, along with curating a suite of software for users of their distro. So updates in Linux typically flow from one distro to another and from the top to the bottom, and sometimes from the bottom to the top. It's crazy, right? So it would be too hard to diagram, and there's many software packages shared between them, okay? There's currently like 600 active distros right now, ranging all the way from Cray Computer Linux for supercomputers down to like Tarpup, right? Which is for like, I want to get my 486 working. All these distros have major and subtle differences from one another that makes choosing an OS super annoying for some people. So I'm making this tutorial for people who want to switch to Linux, but like, look, I'm a gamer. I want to play games, and I want to make sure that you all can keep playing games too. So we're going to talk about how to pick a distro as a Linux noob, like a new person to Linux, with a focus on being able to game with it, okay? So as a new Linux user, there's a lot of things that will be unfamiliar and difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And don't waste time and effort trying to pick like an ideal distro, okay? I see 3 big recommendations all the time, all right? As Linux Mint, as Catchy OS, as Bazite. These all have strengths and weaknesses all their own, but the reason these are all recommended is because they all use heavy graphical environments and a broad community support. And they all work with Steam okay. Weirdly, these popular distros also align with the 3 big upstream projects I find myself using all the time, which of course Linux Mint is a downstream of Debian, Catchy OS is a downstream of Arch, and Bazite is a downstream of Red Hat. Anyway, so you'll see these recommended all the time, and you'll notice I'll be like, oh, these are downstreams of other distros. He's like, well, why not recommend the OG, the upstream? Why do people not recommend the upstreams? With the exception of Red Hat, most of the upstreams are much, much harder to use than most downstream distros and require a lot more out of the user. All right, we got Arch. It's a pain in the ass, okay, to maintain and keep going. I coded. I like Arch for gaming, but, oh. All right, Debian, yeah, power management, baby, way too strict, and good luck changing it. Red Hat is all right. remember, the things that make an operating system that you're going to have to pay attention to, right? You're going to think about file management and the desktop environment and the suite of software that's available to it. Ultimately, on Linux, you are the user in control of these things and can pick programs to fill every single role, okay? Even if you don't like how one OS does it, you can, at least in a Linux ecosystem, either modify that OS to your liking or pick another one that does something in a way you like. I know what I like to use, but Linux is all about user empowerment, right? Remember, this is your computer. It's not my computer. It's not Linus Torvalds' computer. It's your computer. My instructions here are based on experience, but remember, it's always your system, ain't my system. If you don't like a piece of software I recommend, don't fucking use it. Use something else. All right? I'm just going to tell you what I like and what I think would be good starting out. For gamers, and particularly for Linux noobs, I've considered the following. So this is what I learned talking to my Linux noobs out there. What they found easy to use when switching over. So number one, bootloader. I asked, so what bootloader do you like? And they're like, I don't ever fucking think about bootloading. So Grub it is. All right. File management. Everybody seemed to like Dolphin. Dolphin is the best file manager for people who aren't obsessed with managing files. Desktop environment. I'm picking KDE. I'm telling you, KDE. People like KDE. And then as far as the software suite goes for gaming, you will at least need Steam, Wine Tricks, Proton Tricks, some kind of launcher, probably Lutris, FFmpeg, and you will need access to Flatpak. Let me give you it straight. I'm recommending Fedora KDE, all right? There's no fanfare here. You're new to Linux, you should use Fedora KDE. There's no reason to use anything else if you're new to Linux. Fedora is a Red Hat downstream that's community-driven. It's intended as a general-purpose operating system and is both very conventional and boring as far as a Linux system is concerned. I like Fedora because everything fucking works without fighting it, okay? If something doesn't work, by God, you'll find a way to make it work, and it's probably in the Fedora docs or on the forums. The repos are fucking huge, they're well maintained, and there's a lot of different desktop environments supported. And I'm going to warn you this now about Fedora. This is not the default distro for download support, and that's why people always hesitate to recommend it. So with Fedora, you're going to have to learn about Linux packaging systems to use it effectively, but it also has, quite frankly, a good package manager, so it's a good one to learn on. I'm recommending that if you're a Linux noob, the OS you should use is Fedora KDE. That's it. I'm just saying Fedora KDE. The bootloader's grub. You're not going to care about the bootloader. You're just going to bootload. You're not going to care. KDE is the desktop environment. It's good. It's flexible. But it's also very Windows-like, and it doesn't require a lot of intervention from the user to use. Okay? Dolphin is a modern file browser for KDE. Unlike Explorer, it supports features that have been part of other file browsers for a billion years, like tabs, okay, or splitting panes. Multi-pane is great. It also has, quite frankly, a huge suite of software, which is why I'm recommending it, because you're gonna find fucking everything in there. I used to game with Fedora Linux, for God's sake, although I use GNOME. Oh, we're gonna go over it and how to actually install this distro on your computer and how to make a bootable image. And that's gonna be in part 6. So join me in part 6 for that. Yeah, you got any questions? Ask them in the comments.